Hey there, Hawks, back again. It's time for one of my favorite episodes of the Odyssey, Odysseus's Revenge. It sounds just like it's meant to. So we know this whole time that Odysseus has been plotting to take back his house, to protect his family from all of these men, these 118 men who've just been living in his house, trying to court his wife to become their wife. And we know that at the beginning of this episode, Odysseus was promised some help by some pretty important people. Do you remember who they were? Right. So Athena herself promised to aid Odysseus and also pledged the help of her father Zeus. And of course, we know that Odysseus' son Telemachus is going to help him. And we'll see if he finds any help from any of the other members of his household. So we're going to get ready to read now. This is one of the longer episodes, so stay with me. You can have your own text in front of you, or I'll share my screen with you now, and we will have the text there to read along with. Okie dokie. So here we go. Odysseus's Revenge. Now shrugging off his rags, the wiliest fighter of the islands leapt and stood on the broad door-sill, his own bow in hand. So he has shrugged off his disguise. He's no longer the old man. He is himself back in his home. He poured out at his feet a rain of arrows from the quiver and spoke to the crowd. So much for that. Your clean-cut game is over. Now watch me hit a target that no man has hit before if I can make this shot. Help me, Apollo. He drew to his fist the cruel head of an arrow for Antinous. Remember, Antinous was the kind of leader of the group who was a big jerk and threw the stool at the old beggar man. He drew to his fist the cruel head of an arrow for Antinous, just as the young man leaned to lift his beautiful drinking cup. Embossed, two-handled, golden, the cup was in his fingers, the wine was even at his lips. Did he dream of death? How could he? In that revelry amid his throng of friends, who would imagine a single foe, though a strong foe indeed, could dare bring death's pain on him and darkness on his eyes? Odysseus's arrow hit him under the chin and punched up to the feathers through his throat. Backwards and down he went, letting the wine cup fall from his shocked hand. Like pipes, his nostrils jetted crimson runnels, a river of mortal red, and one last kick upset his table, knocking the bread and meat to soak in dusty blood. Now, as they craned to see their champion where he lay, the suitors jostled in an uproar down the hall, everyone on his feet. Wildly they turned and scanned the walls in the long room for arms, but not a shield, not a good ashen spear was there for a man to take and throw. Okay, so remember, Odysseus previously had told Telemachus as part of their plan, hey, when you go home, take all of the weapons off the wall and store them away someplace except for enough for you and I. So that has happened, and only just now are the suitors realizing, oh shoot, we are weaponless, or extra weapons are not at our disposal. They have whatever they have on them at the time. So Antinous, the jerk, cocky leader of the suitors who had so disgraced the old man earlier, has met his untimely end via Odysseus. I want you to reflect and make sure that you understood by answering this question. How exactly, describe how Antinous met his end. So Antinous's death was a grisly one. He was taking a sip of his fancy cup of wine when Odysseus, whoosh, ninja, shot an arrow which punched up into his throat, like full on through his neck, and he toppled over dramatically, knocking stuff over as he went. So Antinous has just died a very bloody and sudden death. Like the rest of the men did not expect that. So now it is their turn to react. So we left off here at line 1430, where they realized that they don't have any weapons to spare. All they could do was yell in outrage at Odysseus. Foul to shoot a man! That was your last shot! Your own throat will be slit for this. Our finest lad is down. You've killed the best on Ithaca. Buzzards will tear your eyes out. For they imagined, as they wished, that it was a wild shot, an unintended killing. Fools not to comprehend that they were already in the grip of death. But glaring under his brows, Odysseus answered, You yellow dogs, you thought I'd never make it home from the land of Troy. You took my house to plunder. You dared bid for my wife while I was still alive. Contempt was all you had for the gods who ruled wide heaven. Contempt for what men say of you hereafter. Your last hour has come. You die in blood. So the suitors think that Odysseus accidentally let this arrow fly and killed Antinous. And he says, No, 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 idiots. This you have coming. You dared to threaten my son, invade my home, pester my wife. No, 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 no. This is intentional. You're all about to die. And he says to them during his little speech that they have shown contempt for the gods, meaning that they have not respected the gods. I want you to think back to the previous episodes where Odysseus had interactions with the suitors. What is it that they did that would prompt him to accuse them of not respecting the gods? In what way have the suitors shown contempt for the gods? Okay, so hopefully you remembered back to when Odysseus first comes home and he's still dressed as the beggar. And he begs them for food. And Antinous is rude to him, throws a chair at him, and is not very hospitable. So Antinous violates that very important Greek code of Xenia when he denies the beggar man, who is secretly Odysseus. And even some of the other suitors at that time were not very happy with Antinous, saying, well, what if he's a god? And Antinous says, meh, I don't really care. So they violated the code of Xenia. And so now Odysseus says, you've done that and you're going to pay for it with your lives. So let's get back to reading. So he says, your last hour has come. You die in blood. And they all took this in. Sickly green fear pulled at their entrails, and their eyes flickered, looking for some hatch or hide away from death. Eurymachus alone could speak. He said, if you are Odysseus of Ithaca, come back, and all that you say these men have done is true. Rash actions, many here, and more in the countryside. But here he lies, the man who caused them all. Antinous was the ringleader. He whipped us on to do these things. He cared less for a marriage than for the power Crinion had denied him as the king of Ithaca. For that, he tried to trap your son and would have killed him. But he is dead now and has had his portion. Spare your own people. As for ourselves, we'll make restitution of wine and meat consumed, and add each one a tithe of 20 oxen, with gifts of bronze and gold to warm your heart. Meanwhile, we cannot blame you for your anger. So one of the suitors steps forward and says to Odysseus, hey man, I'm sorry if it really is you. We owe you an apology. We didn't know you were alive, but that's no excuse. But he begs for mercy, and he gives a really compelling argument as to why Odysseus should spare the remaining men. He blames the entire thing on Antinous, who is now dead. He says, this guy lying here on the floor, the first one you have killed, it's his fault. He's the one who riled us all up, and he was the leader of the suitors. Now that he's dead, you've had your vengeance, and we will pay restitution to you. And if you don't know what the word restitution means, it means we will pay you back everything we owe you. So he not only offers to pay Odysseus back what he's owed, but he also offers to pay back extra. So he says right here, We'll make restitution of wine and meat consumed. So anything we ate over these last 20 years that was meant to be yours, we'll give back to you. And add each one of us, all 117 of them, add each one of us a tithe of 20 oxen with gifts of bronze and gold. So he says, we will more than pay back the trouble that we have caused. So right now, I want you to think, if this was a story of a modern hero, and this man is begging for mercy and offering to do the best he can in paying this hero back, what would a modern hero do as opposed to what you think a epic hero would do? So, judging by our definitions of a modern hero that we kind of worked out at the beginning of this unit, we can usually agree that modern heroes are more merciful, they're more lenient, they're not really a revenge type, uh, as opposed to our epic hero. And in our epic hero definition, we have things like good leadership and bravery and patriotism. But nowhere in that definition is it something like is kind to others or anything that would lead us to believe that Odysseus will be lenient. And in fact, even though um, Eurymachus makes a very compelling argument for why Odysseus should spare them, he really has no intention of doing that. So let's continue reading. We left off at the end of Eurymachus's speech where it says, "Meanwhile, we cannot blame you for your anger." Odysseus glowered under his black brows and said, "Not for the whole treasure of your fathers, all you enjoy, lands, flocks, or any gold put up by others, would I hold my hand. There will be killing till the score is paid. You forced yourself upon this house. Fight your way out now, or run for it if you think you'll escape death. I doubt one man of you skins by." They felt their knees fail and their hearts, but heard Eurymachus for the last time, rallying them. "Friends," he said, "this man is implacable. Now that he's got his hands on a bow and quiver, he'll shoot from the big doorstone there until he kills us to the last man. Fight, I say. Let's remember the joy of it. Swords out. Hold up your tables to deflect his arrows. After me, everyone. Rush him where he stands. If we can budge him from the door, if we can pass into the town, we'll call out men to chase him. This fellow with his bow will shoot no more." He drew his own sword as he spoke, a broadsword of fine bronze, honed like a razor on either edge. Then, crying hoarse and loud, he hurled himself at Odysseus. But the kingly man let fly an arrow at that instant, and the quivering feathered butt sprang to the nipple of his breast as the barb stuck in his liver. The bright broadsword clanged down. He lurched and fell aside, pitching across his table. His cup, his bread, and meat were spilled and scattered far and wide, and his head slammed on the ground. Revulsion, anguish in his heart, with both feet kicking out, he downed his chair while the shrouding wave of mist closed on his eyes. Amphinomus now came running at Odysseus, broadsword naked in his hand. He thought to make the great soldier give way at the door, but with a spear throw from behind, Telemachus hit him between the shoulders, and the lance head drove clear through his chest. He left his feet and fell forward, thudding, forehead against the ground. Telemachus swerved around him, leaving the long, dark spear planted in Amphinomus. If he paused to yank it out, someone might jump him from behind or cut him down with a sword at the moment he bent over. So he ran from the tables to his father's side and halted, panting, saying, "Father, let me bring you a shield and spear, a pair of spears, a helmet. I can arm myself on the run. I'll give outfits to Eumaeus and this cowherd. Better to have equipment." Said Odysseus, "Run then, while I hold them off with arrows, as long as the arrows last. When all are gone, if I am alone, they can dislodge me." Quick upon his father's word, Telemachus ran to the room where the spears and armor lay. He caught up 4 light shields, 4 pairs of spears, 4 helms of war, high plumed with flowing manes, and ran back, loaded down, to his father's side. He was the first to put a helmet on and slide his bare arm in a buckler strap. The servants armed themselves, and all 3 took their stand beside the master of battle. So Odysseus has help. He has his son Telemachus, who has now run to get them more weapons. And he also has Eumaeus and another of his faithful employees from before he left for war. So he's no longer alone. He is standing in the big door frame, taking aim and fighting the suitors from there, but they're still greatly outnumbered. While he had arrows, he aimed and shot, and every shot brought down one of his huddling enemies. But when all barbs had flown from the bowman's fist, he leaned his bow in the bright entryway beside the door, and armed a four-ply shield hard on his shoulder and a crested helm, horse-tailed, nodding stormy upon his head, then took his tough and bronze-shod spears. Aided by Athena, Odysseus, Telemachus, Eumaeus, and another faithful herdsman kill all of the suitors. And Odysseus looked around him narrow-eyed for any others who had lain hidden while death's black fury passed. In blood and dust he saw that crowd all fallen, many and many slain. Think of a catch that fishermen hauled into a half-moon bay in a fine meshed net from the white caps of the sea, how all are poured out on the sand in throes for the salt sea, twitching their cold lives away in Helios' fiery air. So lay the suitors heaped upon one another. So we end the episode with all of the suitors dead, and a nice little epic simile here at the end, which describes the scene that is left at the end of this episode. So I want you to take a look at this last chunk, which starts with the phrase "in blood and dust" and ends with the end of the episode. And I want you to answer me, please, the question that I'm always asking you. What is the epic simile here? What two things are being compared? And what is that linking word that is comparing the simile? Okay, so we have this situation where all of the suitors are dead and scattered around the room, the hundreds of bodies. And we have the comparison word "so." And if you look at the text, you can see how it describes the suitors laying all around, many and many slain, bloody in a big pile. And it asks you, think of a catch that fishermen haul into a half-moon bay. So like a catch of fish, like a big net full of fish. And he says how all of these fish are poured out over the sand. And they're all just laying on top of each other. And it describes them twitching away their lives as they're dying. So a bunch of fish twitching away as they die upon the beach. And that is what they are comparing to the suitors. So lay the suitors, heaped, piled on one another as they are breathing their last breaths, having been slaughtered by Odysseus and his companions. So I also want you to make sure that you know who is it that helped Odysseus ultimately in the battle. According to the text here, who was it that assisted him in the actual ending fight here where all the suitors were finally killed? Right, so a quick check back to your text will show you right here, we have a list of people who assisted Odysseus in his time of need. If I could highlight it, that would be great. Aided by Athena. You could also say that Zeus was there because he made that big show of a bolt of lightning back when Odysseus was competing in the challenge in our previous episode. So aided by Athena, Odysseus has his son Telemachus, the faithful swineherd Eumaeus, who is the one that walked with Odysseus from his hut down to Odysseus's home, and another faithful herdsman. So two faithful members of Odysseus's previous employ, his two previous employees, and his son, and the gods as promised. So at the end here, we kind of have a sense of satisfaction in terms of, okay, Odysseus has accomplished what he set out to accomplish. now all the suitors are dead, like his son is safe. But if we were to look at it from a modern hero perspective, do you think that Odysseus made the right call? If we were looking at him as a modern day hero, is there a way that this should have played out differently? Are there different choices that he could have made? Or do you think that killing all the suitors was the right call? I want you to explain your reasoning, though. If we were looking at this from a modern hero perspective, in your opinion, there's no right or wrong answers. Do you think that Odysseus made the right call, or should he have reacted and handled this situation differently? All right, so that brings us to the end of this episode. We have one more episode to read before the end of the Odyssey. So I'll see you guys next time for our next meeting.